My name is Eleanor, and I'm 65 years old. Last night, my own son struck me across the face until my lips split open, all because I served him dinner that was too cold. While I sat on the kitchen floor dabbing blood from my mouth with a dish towel, he calmly walked upstairs, changed into his pajamas, and went to sleep as if he hadn't just assaulted his own mother. As if hitting the woman who gave him life was just another Tuesday evening. This morning, I woke up with a swollen lip, a bruise blooming across my left cheek, and a cut inside my mouth that stings every time I swallow. But what hurts more than any physical wound is the shame. The humiliation of knowing that my son, the boy I sacrificed everything for, now sees me as nothing more than his personal servant. Someone whose only purpose is to meet his demands and accept his rage without complaint. I got up at 5:30, just like every morning for the past 2 years. David was already awake, sitting at the dining table in his expensive navy suit, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look at me when I shuffled into the kitchen. He just spoke without lifting his eyes from the screen. Breakfast, now. I have a conference call at 7. It was as if the violence from 12 hours ago had never happened. As if he hadn't screamed at me that I was worthless, useless, a burden he should have put in a nursing home years ago. I prepared his eggs exactly the way he demands them. 2 soft-boiled, cooked for exactly 6 minutes, served with 1 piece of whole grain toast cut diagonally, and black coffee with half a teaspoon of sugar, not a grain more. Everything had to be perfect, measured down to the second, because if anything was even slightly wrong, he exploded. And when David exploded, I was the one who paid the price. While he ate, I heard the sound of a key turning in the front door lock. It was Rebecca, his wife, breezing in, wearing a cream-colored dress and heels that clicked against the hardwood floor. She greeted me with that polished smile she reserves for when David is watching. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said in that sweet voice that never sounds quite real. "How are you feeling today?" I wanted to tell her that her husband had slapped me so hard my ears rang for an hour, that I had a cut inside my mouth from where my teeth caught my lip, that I barely slept because I was afraid he might come back downstairs. But instead, I smiled and said, "I'm fine, thank you, dear. Just a little tired. Would you like some breakfast?" David looked up from his phone and shot me a warning glance. His eyes were cold and clear. One wrong word, and tonight would be worse. Then he smiled that charming smile he uses when he has an audience and reached into his briefcase. "Oh, Mom, I almost forgot. I picked this up for you yesterday. It's a really good concealer. Perfect for covering up those little marks you got when you tripped on the stairs last night." Tripped on the stairs. That's what he calls it. As if I had stumbled and fallen all by myself. As if his hand hadn't connected with my face with enough force to knock me sideways into the counter. I took the makeup without saying anything. It was an expensive brand, the kind that costs $60. He probably bought it with my pension money, since he controls every dollar that comes into my bank account. He says it's for my own good, that at my age I can't manage finances responsibly anymore. The truth is, I haven't seen a single penny of my own retirement money in 2 years. Rebecca was gazing at him with shining admiration. "You're so thoughtful, honey, always taking care of your mother. If only she knew that her successful husband, the regional sales director who brings in $500,000 in commissions every year, comes home and takes out every frustration on the woman who raised him alone." After breakfast, David adjusted his burgundy tie, grabbed his leather briefcase, and leaned in close while Rebecca was checking her lipstick in her compact mirror. "Remember what I told you last night?" he whispered in my ear. "My boss is coming here for lunch today at 1 o'clock. You're going to cook something impressive. You're going to smile. You're going to act like the perfect happy mother. And if you say one word, if you show one bruise, if you make me look bad in any way, you'll spend tonight in the garage. Understand? His words froze me to my core. The garage. He'd locked me in there once before, 6 months ago, for 3 hours in the middle of winter because I'd accidentally shrunk one of his shirts in the dryer. Do you understand me? Yes, I whispered. They left together, Rebecca linking her arm through his like they were the perfect power couple. I watched from the window as they climbed into David's black Mercedes, the one that cost more than $80,000. My money, all of it purchased with my retirement savings. When the house fell silent, I sat at the kitchen table and let myself cry. Not soft tears, but body-shaking sobs of rage and helplessness, because I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea what. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I also couldn't see any way out. I sat there for a long time, staring at the morning light stretching across the tile floor I'd mopped 1,000 times. This house used to be my sanctuary. I bought it 32 years ago, with money I'd saved, working as an executive assistant at Thornton & Associates, one of the most prestigious accounting firms in the state. 43 years I gave to that company. Getting up before dawn, staying late, organizing the complex financial lives of dozens of clients. I never imagined I'd end up a prisoner in the home I'd worked so hard to buy. It all started 2 years ago when David's first marriage fell apart. He showed up at my door one rainy Tuesday evening with 2 suitcases and that lost expression that had always melted my heart. "Mom, I need to stay here for a while. Just until I get back on my feet financially. The divorce cleaned me out. I lost the house, most of my savings. I have nowhere else to go." I opened my door and my arms without a second thought. "Of course, sweetheart. This is your home too. It always will be." How foolish I was. I didn't know I was inviting a nightmare into my life. The first few months seemed normal enough. David would wake early, go to work, come home at a reasonable hour. We'd have dinner together and talk about his day. He even helped me with yard work on weekends. I thought we were finally building the close mother-son relationship I'd always wanted. But little by little, things changed. First came the small criticisms. "Mom, this chicken is overcooked." "Mom, why is there dust on the bookshelf?" "Mom, your clothes look shabby. It's embarrassing when my colleagues ask about you." The comments stung, but I told myself he was just stressed from the divorce. Then he started inserting himself into my finances. "Mom, at your age, you shouldn't be managing complex accounts. What if you make a mistake? What if someone takes advantage of you? Let me help." I gave him access to my bank accounts. "It's just to help me," I reasoned. "He's my son. He would never hurt me." How completely wrong I was. Within 6 months, David had total control of my money. My monthly pension of $1,400 went directly into an account he managed. He gave me $40 a week for personal expenses, like I was a child receiving an allowance. When I asked about the rest, he'd say, "I'm investing your savings, Mom, building your security. Trust me." Then Rebecca entered the picture. A woman 15 years younger than David, with a practiced smile and obvious ambition. He'd met her at a corporate conference where she worked in business development. 8 months later, they married in a ceremony that cost over $60,000. My money, naturally. Since Rebecca came into our lives, everything deteriorated rapidly. David started treating me like hired help. Mom cooked dinner for Rebecca and me. Something sophisticated. She's used to fine dining. Mom cleaned the guest bathroom. "We're having important people over. Mom, hand wash this shirt. It costs $300. Too expensive to risk in the machine." And I obeyed every command. I obeyed because I was terrified of his anger, afraid he'd follow through on his threat to have me declared incompetent and put in a state facility. Because even though the house was legally mine, David had convinced me to add his name to the deed for estate planning purposes. In case something happens to you, Mom, we need to be practical. The violence started about a year ago. At first, it was accidental seeming pushes. Then painful pinches on my arm when I was too slow. You're making me crazy, Mom. Can't you move faster? Then it escalated to shoves against the wall, slaps when meals weren't perfect, kicks to my shins if I didn't clean quickly enough. But last night crossed a line I never imagined he'd cross. I had prepared pot roast for dinner, his favorite meal. I'd spent 3 hours cooking it, making sure the meat was tender and the vegetables were perfect. I set the table carefully, lit candles, even put out the good china. Everything looked beautiful. David came home exhausted from work, barely acknowledged me, and sat down at the table. He cut into the roast, took one bite, and his face transformed. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, spitting the food back onto his plate. "It's cold, stone cold. Are you trying to poison me?" I rushed to explain. "I'm so sorry. I made it early and it must have cooled down." "Let me reheat it. Just give me 2 minutes." Too late. David stood up like an explosion, grabbed his plate, and hurled it against the wall. China shattered. Food splattered across the cream-colored paint I'd just repainted last month. "You're useless!" he screamed, advancing on me. 43 years as an assistant, and you can't even serve a hot meal. You're pathetic." He grabbed my shoulders and slammed me against the refrigerator. My head cracked against the stainless steel, and stars burst behind my eyes. But he wasn't finished. He slapped me across the face with his open palm. The sound echoed through the kitchen. My lips split. I tasted blood. He slapped me again, and again. "Rebecca's parents are coming this weekend," he said while I covered my face with my arms. "I want you to prepare a perfect meal. And if you embarrass me, if you show even a hint of your incompetence, I swear to God, I'll put you in the cheapest nursing home I can find and sell this house." Then something shifted in him, the way it always does after he hurts me. He calmed down instantly, helped me to my feet, and gently dabbed at my bleeding lip with a paper towel. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly. "I just get so frustrated. You know I only want the best for you. I'm trying to teach you to do better. It's for your own good." Then he went upstairs and fell asleep within minutes. I stayed awake all night in the kitchen, cleaning up the shattered plate and the food stains on the wall. Every tiny piece of china I picked up felt like I was gathering fragments of my shattered dignity. My lip wouldn't stop bleeding, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological anguish. The realization that my son, the baby I'd carried, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had become my tormentor. As I scrubbed the wall, I found myself remembering David as a little boy. He wasn't always this monster. When he was young, he was sweet and affectionate. His father abandoned us when David was 7, and from that point, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts for years to give him everything. I sent him to private school on a secretary's salary. I bought him the designer clothes he wanted, paid for tennis lessons and debate club, and every opportunity I could afford. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I spoiled him so badly that he never learned respect, or empathy, or gratitude. I gave him everything without asking for anything in return. And now, I'm paying the price for those decisions. At dawn, I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs. My heart started racing, the way it always does when he's near. It's horrifying to live in constant fear in your own home. He entered the kitchen, already dressed in his charcoal suit, checking his phone as he does every morning. He sat down without speaking and waited for me to serve him. I prepared his soft-boiled eggs, his precisely cut toast, his measured coffee, all in complete silence. He ate while typing emails, as if I were invisible. At 7:15, Rebecca arrived in her cream dress and clicked her way to the table. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said with her plastic smile. "How are you today?" "Fine, thank you. Would you like breakfast?" "Just green tea, please. Light." As I was heating the water, I felt her eyes on me. Her gaze lingered on my swollen lip, on the purple bruise barely concealed by the expensive makeup David had given me. For just a moment, I thought she might say something. Might ask what happened? But instead, she simply looked away and returned to her phone. David finished eating and looked at me with those cold eyes. "Remember what I said, Mom. My boss, Richard Thornton, is coming at 1 o'clock for lunch. I want you to make something impressive. Seared salmon with asparagus and hollandaise sauce, Caesar salad, chocolate souffle for dessert, and pick up a bottle of the good wine, the Bordeaux, not that cheap stuff you usually buy." He handed me 3 $20 bills like it was a generous gift. $60 to prepare an elaborate meal for 3 people. Salmon alone would cost $40. "And one more thing," he added, leaning close while Rebecca was touching up her lipstick. "Put on that makeup properly. Cover those marks completely. If Richard notices anything strange, if he asks any questions about your appearance, you're going to wish you'd never been born. Understand?" I nodded, feeling my hands start to shake. He smiled, kissed my forehead like the perfect devoted son he pretends to be, and they left together. As soon as the door closed, I collapsed into a chair. $60 for an elaborate lunch. Fresh salmon would cost at least $35. Good wine, another $25? How was I supposed to create miracles with so little? But it wasn't the money that terrified me most. It was the pressure of acting normal in front of David's boss, pretending to be the happy mother in a loving family, when the reality was that I was an abused woman trapped in my own home. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. My lip was swollen and discolored despite the concealer. There was a small cut at the corner of my mouth. My left cheek had a purple-yellow bruise spreading toward my ear. My eyes were red and puffy from crying. I opened the expensive makeup David had bought me. High-end foundation, the kind elegant women like Rebecca wear every day. I started applying it carefully, layering it over every mark, every bruise, every piece of evidence of what really happens in this house. As I worked, I couldn't stop thinking about how many times I'd done this before. How many mornings I'd stood at this mirror, hiding bruises, inventing explanations for injuries. I tripped over the coffee table. The cabinet door swung into my face. I fell on the stairs, one lie after another to protect David's perfect reputation. I went to the store with my shopping list and my carefully made-up face. At the market, I tried to stretch those $60 as far as possible. I bought the cheapest salmon that still looked decent, a wine that was on sale. I skipped the fresh asparagus and bought frozen. Every penny mattered. While waiting in the checkout line, I saw Patricia, my next-door neighbor. She's a widow in her early 60s who has always been kind to me. "Hello, Eleanor," she said with a warm smile. "I haven't seen you in your garden lately. How have you been, dear?" "Hello, Patricia. I'm well, thank you. Just busy with household things." She looked at me closely, her eyes lingering on my mouth despite the makeup. "Did something happen to your lip?" she asked with genuine concern. My pulse quickened. "Nothing serious. I just bit it while eating yesterday." "You know how clumsy I can be." Patricia frowned slightly but didn't push further. "Well, if you ever need anything, Eleanor, anything at all, I'm right next door. I'm home most afternoons if you want to come over for tea." Her words touched something deep inside me. It had been so long since anyone had offered me genuine kindness, since anyone had treated me like a human being who mattered. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything, to beg for her help, to confess the nightmare I was living. But David's voice echoed in my mind. If you tell anyone what happens in this house, no one will believe you. You're just a senile old woman living off her son's charity. I'll have you committed so fast your head will spin. Thank you, Patricia, I said simply. You're very kind. I went home and started cooking like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. I had to have everything perfect by 1 o'clock when David and his boss arrived. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, set the dining table with the good crystal and silver, arranged fresh flowers in the centerpiece. Everything had to be flawless. While I cooked, I couldn't stop thinking about Patricia's words. If you ever need anything, I'm right next door. Did she suspect something? Had she heard the shouting that came from my house at night? At 12:45, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Davis? A man's voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is James Morrison, the Chief Financial Officer at Thornton and Associates. We need to speak with you urgently about some irregularities we've discovered in the company accounts. Could you come to the office tomorrow morning at 9? My heart stopped. Irregularities? I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? I'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone, Mrs. Davis, but it's very important. Can you be here at 9 tomorrow morning? I hung up, my hands trembling. What had David done at work? Why were they calling me? A sick feeling settled in my stomach, but I didn't have time to think about it because the doorbell was ringing. It was exactly 1 o'clock. I took a deep breath, checked my makeup one final time, smoothed my dress, and went to answer the door. There was David with his charming professional smile, and next to him stood a distinguished man in his late 50s wearing an elegant gray suit. Mrs. Davis, David said warmly for his boss's benefit. This is Richard Thornton, the Regional Vice President of Sales. Richard, this is my mother, Eleanor. I'm delighted to meet you, Mrs. Davis, Richard said, extending his hand. David speaks about you often. But as Richard shook my hand, his expression changed. His eyes widened slightly. His professional smile faltered. Eleanor, he said slowly. Eleanor Davis from Thornton and Associates? My breath caught. Yes, I worked there for 43 years. I retired 2 years ago. Richard's face transformed completely. He turned to look at David with an expression I couldn't quite read. You never mentioned your mother was Eleanor Davis. David's confident smile flickered. I didn't realize you'd know her. The firm has hundreds of employees. Richard shook his head slowly. Eleanor wasn't just any employee. She was Marcus Thornton's personal executive assistant for 20 years. My father trusted her with the most sensitive accounts in the entire firm. When she retired, he told me it was like losing his right hand. David's face went pale. He clearly had no idea about my actual importance at the firm. He'd always treated my career as if I'd been some low-level secretary filing papers. Richard looked at me more closely, and I saw his expression shift as he noticed my makeup. The way I was holding myself tensely, the swelling I couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Davis, are you feeling all right? You look like you might be in pain. I'm fine, I started to say automatically. But David interrupted smoothly. Mom had a little fall on the stairs yesterday. She's getting older, you know. Balance isn't what it used to be. Nothing serious. I watched something change in Richard's eyes. Something sharp and assessing. A man doesn't become a vice president without learning to read people. He was reading me now. And I could see him noticing things. The way I flinched slightly when David moved. The careful distance I maintained. The fear in my eyes despite my smile. Well, Richard said carefully, I'm sure lunch will be lovely. Shall we go in? I served the meal I'd spent hours preparing. The salmon was perfectly seared. The frozen asparagus looked almost fresh with the sauce. The salad was crisp. Everything was exactly as David had demanded. The men ate and discussed business while I went back and forth from the kitchen, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates. Richard kept watching me with that assessing gaze. "Mrs. Davis?" he said during the main course. "I've been meaning to ask you something. We're actually looking for a senior consultant to help train our new executive assistants. Someone with your level of experience would be invaluable. Would you be interested in coming back part-time?" Before I could respond, David jumped in. "That's very generous, Richard, but Mom is really enjoying her retirement. She's not up for working anymore." "Are you sure? Health issues?" Richard asked, looking directly at me. "Not exactly," David said smoothly. "More cognitive. She gets confused sometimes. Forgets things. It's part of aging, unfortunately." I felt humiliation burn through me. He was telling his boss I was mentally incompetent. Richard set down his fork. "David, I'm going to be direct with me. Your mother doesn't seem confused at all. She seems frightened." There was a long, terrible silence. David's mask cracked just slightly. I saw rage flash across his face before he controlled it. "Richard, I don't know what you're implying, but I think you're misreading the situation." "Am I?" Richard asked quietly. "Because I'm trained to notice financial irregularities, and I've been noticing some interesting patterns in your expense reports lately. Large personal purchases categorized as business expenses. Cash advances that don't quite add up." David's face went completely white. Richard continued, his voice steady but hard. "I didn't want to bring this up during a social lunch, but since we're being direct, I had our accounting team run a detailed audit of your accounts last week. David, you've been embezzling from the company. And not small amounts. We're talking about over $90,000 in the past 18 months. The room seemed to stop breathing. Richard looked at me. "Mrs. Davis, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to tell me the truth. Has your son been controlling your finances?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was it. The moment I'd been terrified of for 2 years. David was staring at me with murder in his eyes, silently warning me to stay quiet. But something in Richard's face, something in the way he was looking at me with concern and respect, something broke open inside me. "Yes," I whispered. "He controls everything. My pension, my savings, all of it." Richard nodded slowly. "And the fall on the stairs you mentioned, David, did that really happen?" "Say yes, Mom," David said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "Tell him about your fall." For the first time in 2 years, I looked my son directly in the eyes without fear. "There was no fall." I said it clearly. "He hit me. Last night. Because dinner was cold." David exploded out of his chair. "She's lying. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." Richard stood as well, calm but commanding. "David, sit down, now! I'm calling the police!" "You're not calling anyone!" David shouted. "This is my house!" "Actually," Richard said quietly, checking something on his phone, according to property records, "this house belongs solely to Eleanor Davis. You just live here." David's face was pure rage now. All pretense of control was gone. He looked at me with hatred I'd never seen before. "You stupid old woman. You've ruined everything. You've destroyed my life." Richard stepped between us. "David, I'm giving you one chance to walk out of this house calmly. If you don't, I'll have you arrested right here. For the embezzlement, for elder abuse, and for assault." David's chest was heaving. His hands were clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually attack Richard. But then his shoulders sagged. Without another word, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. The silence that followed was enormous. I sat down heavily in my chair, suddenly shaking uncontrollably. "Mrs. Davis," Richard said gently, sitting beside me. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known what was happening, I would have intervened months ago." I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, tears streaming down my face, washing away the expensive makeup and revealing all the bruises underneath. Richard made several phone calls. First to the police, reporting the assault and the embezzlement, then to someone named Jennifer Hartley, who he explained was a lawyer specializing in elder abuse cases. Within an hour, my small house was full of people. Police officers taking my statement and photographing my injuries. Jennifer Hartley, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, explaining my legal rights. Patricia from next door, who'd seen the police cars and come over, now holding my hand and crying. "Eleanor," Patricia kept saying. I knew something was wrong. I heard shouting so many times. I should have done something sooner. "You didn't know," I told her. I hid it well. "Not well enough," she said. "I actually installed a small security camera pointed at your house last month. I was worried." She looked at the police officers. "I have footage. Weeks of footage. Shouting, things breaking. Eleanor looking terrified." The police officer's eyes lit up. "Ma'am, we're going to need that footage." By evening, David had been arrested at his office. Richard had personally ensured he was escorted out in handcuffs in front of all his colleagues. The charges were severe: embezzlement, elder abuse, assault, financial exploitation. The police told me he likely wouldn't be granted bail given the evidence. That night, Patricia insisted I stay at her house. "Your home isn't safe yet," she said. "Not until we're certain David can't make bail." Her guest room was small and cozy, decorated in soft blues and creams. "This was my daughter's room before she got married," Patricia explained. "Now it's yours for as long as you need." For the first time in 2 years, I went to bed without fear. I didn't have to worry about footsteps in the hallway, sudden shouting, violence in the middle of the night. It was strange. Peace can be frightening when you're not used to it. The next morning, Jennifer Hartley called with news. "Eleanor, David's bail hearing is this afternoon at 3. The judge will decide if he can be released while awaiting trial. I need you to testify." "What are the chances he'll be released?" I asked, fear creeping back. "With the evidence we have, including Patricia's videos, very low. But your testimony will be crucial." The courtroom was small and formal. David sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. When he saw me enter, his expression transformed from surprise to pure hatred. Rebecca was sitting in the gallery, looking haggard and shocked. When our eyes met, I saw something unexpected in her face. Shame. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair and penetrating eyes. "Mrs. Davis," she said when it was my turn to testify. "Please tell the court what you've experienced in your home over the past 2 years." I took a deep breath and told the truth. All of it. The financial control, the escalating violence, the constant threats, the humiliation. My voice shook at times, but I kept talking. When I mentioned the $90,000 he'd stolen, David's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him. "And what did your son say to you yesterday morning regarding this lunch?" the judge asked. "He threatened that if I embarrassed him in front of his boss, if I showed any sign of what he'd done to me, he would put me in a nursing home and sell my house." The judge reviewed Patricia's video recordings on a tablet. She watched them in silence while the entire courtroom waited. The videos showed David shouting at me through windows, showed me flinching and crying, showed violence I didn't even remember. "Mr. David Davis," the judge finally said. "The evidence shows a clear and disturbing pattern of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and assault. Combined with the embezzlement charges from your employer, you pose both a flight risk and a danger to the victim. Your bail request is denied. You will remain in custody until trial. David exploded. This is insane. That woman is making everything up. She's confused. She doesn't understand what she's saying. Guards had to restrain him as he continued shouting. You're going to regret this, Mom. When I get out of here, I swear to God you'll pay for this. His threats echoed through the courtroom, proving exactly what I'd testified about his violent nature. After the hearing, Rebecca approached me in the courthouse corridor. Jennifer tensed beside me. But I nodded that it was all right. Eleanor, Rebecca said, and for the first time her voice sounded genuine. I need to apologize. I knew something was wrong. I heard the shouting. I saw your bruises. I noticed how terrified you were. Then why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I was afraid, she admitted. David had threatened me too. He told me if I ever betrayed him, he'd destroy my career, ruin my reputation. And I was a coward. I chose my comfortable life over your safety. Tears filled her eyes. Yesterday, after the police arrested him, I found documents in his home office. He'd been stealing from my accounts too. We've been married 18 months, and I never realized he'd taken nearly $30,000 from me. What are you going to do now? I asked. I'm filing for divorce immediately, she said with sudden steel in her voice, and I'm going to testify against him at trial. I've already spoken with the prosecutor. I want to help make sure he pays for everything he did to both of us. When we left the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Real hope. Not just survival, but the possibility of an actual future. Jennifer gave me more news that afternoon. Eleanor, Richard Thornton contacted me. Thornton and Associates wants to make things right. They're offering you a position as senior training consultant, $4,000 per month plus full benefits, and as recognition that you were victimized by David's crimes, they're offering a $50,000 settlement. $50,000. It was more money than I'd had access to in 2 years. $4,000 a month was nearly 3 times my pension. What about my house? I asked. David told me it was in both our names. We checked the property records, Jennifer said, smiling. David lied. The house is registered solely in your name. He forged some documents trying to add himself, but they were never legally valid. The house is completely yours. For the first time in so long, I could see a possible future. A future where I could live without fear, where I could make my own decisions, where I could be the owner of my own life. But I also knew David wasn't finished. His threats at the hearing had been crystal clear. This war was just beginning. 3 days after David's arrest, I learned that hatred doesn't stop at jail walls. I had moved back into my own house, though Patricia checked on me constantly and I'd had a security system installed. I was starting to feel safe again. Then the first letter arrived. It came through his lawyer, though it clearly wasn't an official legal document. It was handwritten in David's precise script. Dear Mom, I hope you're enjoying your little victory. I hope you feel proud of yourself for destroying your own son. But I want you to remember something. I know things about you, secrets you've kept for 43 years working at that firm. Things that could ruin not just your reputation, but send you to prison. My hands started shaking as I read. What secrets? During my decades at Thornton and Associates, I'd handled confidential information certainly, but I'd never done anything illegal. Remember the Barlow case from 12 years ago? The pharmaceutical lawsuit where Thornton and Associates defended Medcore Industries? I found the documents you altered. The internal memos you hid, evidence you suppressed that showed the company knew their medication was causing heart attacks. If that evidence surfaces now, You'll be charged with obstruction of justice and accessory to wrongful death. Prison time, Mom. Years of it. My heart stopped. I did vaguely remember the Barlow case. It had been a massive lawsuit where our firm represented a drug company being sued by patients who'd had heart attacks. Marcus Thornton had asked me to reorganize the discovery documents to ensure certain internal communications weren't prominently featured in the disclosure. I'd thought it was normal legal strategy, protecting attorney-client privilege. I never understood I might have been concealing evidence. I have copies of everything, the letter continued. Documents with your handwriting on them? Notes in the margins showing you knew exactly what you were doing. And if you don't drop all charges against me, if you don't come to the jail and sign a statement saying you made everything up due to dementia, those documents go to the prosecutor. Imagine the headlines. 65-year-old secretary arrested for covering up drug deaths. Your precious reputation destroyed. Your new job gone. Your freedom taken. Just like you took mine. You have 1 week to decide. Choose wisely. I sat in my kitchen reading that letter over and over, feeling my brief hope crumble. When Jennifer came by that evening, I showed her the letter with trembling hands. "This is blatant blackmail," she said immediately. "But we need to assess if his threats have merit. What exactly do you remember about the Barlow case?" I told her everything. How Marcus Thornton had asked me to reorganize exhibits to ensure certain memos weren't in the primary disclosure boxes. How I'd followed his instructions because I trusted he was operating within legal bounds. "Did you understand at the time that you might be concealing evidence?" Jennifer asked carefully. "No," I said honestly. "I thought I was just organizing documents according to attorney strategy." Mr. Thornton told me it was standard practice for protecting the client. Jennifer sighed. "Legally, ignorance isn't a complete defense. If you genuinely participated in hiding evidence, even unknowingly, there could be consequences. But it was 12 years ago. The statute of limitations may have expired. We need to investigate this carefully." The second letter arrived 3 days later, even more vicious. "I see you haven't learned your lesson, Mother. You still think you can defy me? Fine. Now everyone will see what kind of person you really are." Attached were photographs, photos of actual documents from Thornton and Associates files, internal MedCorps memos with my handwritten notes in the margins, filing notations showing documents moved from one category to another. Evidence that I had indeed been involved in organizing discovery in ways that concealed damaging information. "These photos go to the newspaper tomorrow unless you come to the jail. Alone. No lawyers. No witnesses. You'll bring a notarized letter dropping all charges and stating you fabricated everything due to mental deterioration. And there's more, Mom. Remember those cash bonuses Mr. Thornton gave you every Christmas? The ones you never reported as income because you thought they were personal gifts? Tax evasion. 20 years of unreported income. That's another $50,000 in back taxes and penalties. Maybe even criminal charges. So here's your choice. Drop the charges and admit you're a senile liar. Or watch your perfect reputation get destroyed. Watch yourself get arrested. Watch everything you worked for turn to ashes. You have 48 hours. When Jennifer read the second letter, her expression turned grave. "Eleanor, I need complete honesty. Did you receive cash payments from Marcus Thornton that you didn't report?" I felt shame wash over me. Yes. Every Christmas for about 20 years, he'd give me an envelope with cash, usually around $2,000. He called it a personal thank you, separate from my official bonus. I thought it was a gift. I didn't know I had to report gifts as income. Jennifer calculated quickly. With interest and penalties, we're looking at a significant tax debt, maybe $40,000 to $50,000. And technically, yes, it could be considered tax evasion. David has built the perfect trap. If I proceeded with charges against him, he would destroy me with evidence of my own mistakes. If I dropped the charges, he'd remain free to abuse me again. And probably to continue stealing money from others. There's a third option, Jennifer said after thinking carefully. One that neither you nor David expects. We get ahead of him. We voluntarily disclose everything to the authorities before he can use it as blackmail. We show that you were a victim of manipulation at work, that you didn't understand you were doing anything wrong, and that your son is using these mistakes to psychologically torture you from jail. It was a terrifying gamble. It meant publicly admitting to mistakes that could have serious consequences, exposing myself to potential prosecution, destroying the professional reputation I'd spent 43 years building. But it also meant taking away David's weapon. If there were no secrets left to hide, he'd have no power over me. Let's do it, I finally said. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of my son controlling my life from a jail cell. Tomorrow, Jennifer said, we're going to give David the surprise of his life. The next morning, Jennifer organized a meeting with the district attorney, the IRS, and representatives from Thornton and Associates. We sat in a conference room and I confessed everything. The Barlow case documents I'd helped reorganize without understanding the legal implications. The cash payments I'd received and never reported. Every mistake I'd made in 43 years. I held nothing back. The DA, a serious woman named Margaret Chen, listened carefully. Mrs. Davis, she said when I finished, your son contacted my office 2 days ago. He offered to provide evidence of corporate fraud at Thornton and Associates in exchange for reduced charges. We were planning to investigate his claims. Now I understand what he was really doing. Weaponizing your honest mistakes to escape consequences for his own deliberate crimes. Richard Thornton, who'd come to the meeting personally, spoke up. Margaret, I've reviewed the Barlow case files from 12 years ago. Eleanor was following explicit instructions from my father, who passed away 5 years ago. She had no way of knowing his instructions might be improper. She was a secretary following her boss's orders, not a lawyer making strategic decisions. And regarding the cash payments, Richard continued, those were entirely my father's doing. He should have issued proper tax documents. Eleanor reasonably believed they were personal gifts. The IRS representative, a thin man named Robert Garcia, reviewed his notes. Mrs. Davis, given the circumstances, your age, the clear evidence that you were manipulated both at work and by your son, and your voluntary disclosure, were willing to offer a settlement. You'll owe approximately $38,000 in back taxes and penalties. We'll set up a payment plan. No criminal charges. I felt tears of relief. The $50,000 settlement from Thornton and Associates would cover the tax debt and still leave me with money. But what about the Barlow case? I asked. Could I be charged with obstruction of justice? Margaret Chen shook her head. The statute of limitations expired 7 years ago, and frankly, the evidence shows you were a victim of your employer's misconduct, not a willing participant. You won't face any charges. But your son, she added with a slight smile, is now facing additional charges for attempted blackmail and witness intimidation. Those letters he sent you? Each one is a separate felony. That afternoon, Jennifer and I held a small press conference. Just local media, but David would see it eventually. My name is Eleanor Davis, I said, looking directly into the cameras. I'm 65 years old, and for 2 years I was a victim of elder abuse by my son. But he didn't stop with physical and financial abuse. From jail, he's been trying to blackmail me using mistakes I made decades ago. Mistakes I didn't know were mistakes at the time. I told them about the Barlow case, about the unreported income, all of it. I would rather face the consequences of my honest errors than continue to be controlled by my son's manipulation. Today, I'm here to take away his power. There are no secrets left for him to use against me. I want to send a message to anyone being abused by family members. emotional blackmail, financial control, threats of exposure. These are all forms of abuse. Don't let fear of judgment keep you prisoner. Your freedom is worth more than your reputation. After the press conference, I felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, the jail called. "Your son is requesting a phone call with you," the officer said. "Do you accept?" I thought about saying no, but I needed to hear his voice, needed to know this was really ending. I accepted the call. "Mom?" David's voice came through, and it sounded completely defeated. "I saw your press conference. You destroyed everything. You destroyed my last chance." "No, David," I replied calmly. "You destroyed that chance when you decided to turn your mother into your victim." There was a long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. "Will you ever forgive me?" "Someday," I said honestly, "when you've served your time, when you've gotten real help to understand why you did this, when you can genuinely comprehend the damage you caused. Someday I might forgive you, but I will never forget. And things will never be the same between us." I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I started my new job at Thornton & Associates. My office was small, but had a window overlooking the city. My title was Senior Training Consultant, and my first task was teaching new executive assistants about professional ethics and recognizing workplace manipulation. On my desk, there was a framed photo Patricia had given me. It showed me in my garden, smiling genuinely, taken just last week. I looked at that photo and barely recognized the terrified woman I'd been 2 months ago. David's trial happened 4 months later. Rebecca testified against him, as did Richard Thornton, Patricia with her videos, and finally me. The evidence was overwhelming. David was sentenced to 7 years in prison for embezzlement, elder abuse, assault, and attempted blackmail. 7 years. He'll be 52 when he's released. Maybe, just maybe, he'll have learned something by then. Maybe he'll have become the man I always hoped he'd be. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not waiting for him to change before I live my life. Today, 1 year after that terrible night when David struck me over cold dinner, I'm sitting in my garden drinking coffee in the morning sunshine. Patricia is coming over for lunch. We've become close friends, 2 widows who understand the value of freedom and safety. My tax debt is being paid off in manageable installments from my salary. The house is legally secured in my name, only with no possibility of David claiming ownership. I have money in my own bank account that no one else controls. I sleep peacefully every night without fear. Last week, I got a letter from David. Not a threatening one this time. A real letter, written in what seemed like genuine remorse. "Mom, I'm in therapy. Court ordered, but I'm actually participating. I'm starting to understand what I did to you. How I turned into my father. The man who abandoned us. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I'm trying to understand why I became a monster." I wrote back. A short letter. "David, I'm glad you're getting help. That's the first step. But healing takes years, not months. When you're released, we can talk about what kind of relationship, if any, we might have. Until then, I'm building a life that doesn't revolve around your choices. I wish you genuine transformation. But I'm no longer waiting for it to feel whole." I sent the letter and felt nothing but peace. Because I've learned the most important lesson of my life. Freedom isn't given, it's taken, it's claimed, it's defended. For 2 years, I thought I was trapped because David was bigger, stronger, in control of my money, and capable of violence. I thought I had no choices, but I always had one choice. The choice to speak the truth. The choice to risk everything for the possibility of freedom. The choice to stop protecting his reputation and start protecting my life. This is my story of reclaiming my voice after 2 years of silence. And if you're living in a situation right now where someone controls you through fear, through money, through threats of exposure or violence, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not trapped. You feel trapped, and that feeling is real and valid. But feeling trapped is different from being trapped. There are people who specialize in helping victims of elder abuse, domestic violence, financial exploitation. There are lawyers like Jennifer who will fight for you, neighbors like Patricia who notice more than you think, bosses like Richard who care about what happens to their employees even after they retire. You don't have to figure this out alone. You don't have to be perfect to deserve help. I made mistakes in my career. I didn't report income I should have reported. I followed instructions that turned out to be unethical. I wasn't a perfect victim with a flawless past. And I still deserved safety. I still deserved freedom. Your mistakes, whatever they are, don't mean you deserve to be abused. Here's what I wish someone had told me 2 years ago. Financial control is abuse, even when it comes from family. If someone manages your money and won't let you access your own accounts, that's abuse, not helping. Abuse. Physical violence is never justified, no matter what you did or didn't do. Cold dinner doesn't deserve a slap. Burnt toast doesn't deserve a punch. Forgetting something doesn't deserve violence. Nothing does. If you're afraid in your own home, trust that fear. Your instincts are telling you something is wrong. Fear isn't something you should have to live with in your own house. It's never too late to change your life. I was 65 years old when I finally fought back. 65. If I can rebuild at my age, you can do it at yours. And finally, speaking the truth is terrifying. But silence is more dangerous. Silence protected David for 2 years. Truth set me free in 2 months. If you're suffering in silence right now, please know that there are people ready to listen. The National Elder Abuse Hotline exists for this exact reason. Local domestic violence organizations help people of all ages. You deserve peace. You deserve safety. You deserve a life without fear. And you deserve to keep your own money, make your own choices, and live without violence. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it opened your eyes to something happening in your own life or in the life of someone you love, please share it. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. Who needs permission to finally speak up? Who needs to know that freedom is possible? Subscribe to this channel if these stories remind you that truth is more powerful than silence, that justice is possible even when it seems impossible, and that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Leave a comment below if you want. Share your story if you feel safe doing so. This community sees you. Your voice matters. And remember this: the person who truly loves you will never make you afraid to speak. Real love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't demand your fear. It doesn't need your powerlessness to feel powerful. If someone claims to love you while controlling you, that's not love. That's ownership, and you are not property. You are a human being with rights, with dignity, with value that exists independent of what you can do for anyone else. Freedom is always worth more than the comfort of silence. Always. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go live yours, on your terms, in your time, with your voice. You've got this.